Hey, how y'all doing? I'm Shantane. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Georgia. I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to do a story time today about the time I had a client attack me. So, this will either be very entertaining or maybe traumatic, depending on your perception and worldview and all of that. So, before I get into the story, I'm going to preface this by saying I have to be very vague as I'm telling about this experience I had. Um, I don't want to violate any HIPAA laws, so I'm not going to be, everything's going to be made up locations, names. I might give like a vague area where this happened just so you can kind of get the feel a little bit, but I don't want to violate HIPAA. And also want to protect the people that I'll be referring to because um, let's just say it's a lot. So picture it. Be real vague. Georgia, February 2020. Right before Miss Koviana entered the chat. So I used to work for a community mental health agency, and if you know, is rough. And so typically, at least in my experience, I didn't see clients in the office. Well, some clients I did. Sometimes they'd come in the office and we'd have sessions, but for the most part, I was on the road driving to the clients' homes or to their schools. Um, and so I was assigned this client in October 2019. So remember that because that's going to be important later on. So at this point, I have a pretty good rapport with the client. So a little bit of backstory. When I was assigned this client, I was also assigned their four other siblings, which I didn't really understand. I am of the opinion that if there is a family, especially for working with children, that each child has their own advocate. But hey, I didn't make the rules. This was not my agency. This was a community mental health agency I worked for. It was my first paying job. Okay. So there's that. And also, what also might be important is at that job, the therapists that were assigned to the clients, we were not the ones that completed the biopsychosocial or the initial assessment. So what would happen is, whatever therapist went out there did the assessment, they will provide it to us, and they would have basically think of like a case conceptualization and a diagnosis. So that's all you pretty much know before you meet the client. So keep in mind, this is February 2020. Um, I remember it like yesterday. It was a Friday. I remember exactly what I had on. But so I go to the client's school just like every day. I go to the front office. I sign in, and the people at the front desk, they will call down to the teachers, let them know I was coming, and I go down there, go downstairs or wherever the classroom was. So anyway, when I got to the client that day, his teacher was with him, and he was telling me, he was like, let's call the client Christopher Robin. He was like, Christopher Robin's been kind of withdrawn today. It's hard to engage with him. He's not responding, but he did start a new medication. His auntie told us that he took it this morning before he went to school, and he also just had a dosage of it. Um, it was either before or after he went to lunch, but the client had already gone to lunch. So um, the week prior, the client was kind of in a similar, like, disengaged mood, but that was for a different purpose. That week, I had went to see him at his house, and his aunt told me that he had gotten in a fight with his siblings. And I mean, of course, if you got into a fight, you're not gonna be in the best mood and want to talk. But he had like scratches all over his face. He had a black eye. Like, it was terrible. This week, though, the things had healed. He was still kind of hurt, but some time had passed since the fight. So anyway, I told the teacher that's fine, we'll talk, whatever. So we're at this table, and it's like a long rectangular table. So I'm sitting on the long end right here, and my client's right here on the short end. And I'm sitting there, he's sitting there, he's looking at me, but it's like he's looking through me. His eyes are like completely glazed over, and he was not responding. And I was like, so Christopher Robin, like, I'm trying everything to get his attention and get him engaged. And I know the things that he liked because we've been meeting since October. So I'm like, he loves horror movies. So I was like, is there any new horror movie you're interested in? He also liked playing Uno. I took up the cards, shuffled them, dealt them. He didn't want to play. He loved talking about shoes. So I was like, have you been in this sneakers app lately? You see any new drops you wanted? Nothing. So we went through that whole thing for the better part of like maybe 10 minutes or so. So finally I was like, okay, well, you don't want to talk? That's fine. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. We got an hour. I'm going to just sit here. So I take out my laptop. I start doing notes. And at this point, he's got his head on his arms, and like which were on top of the desk. So he's kind of sitting like this with his head down. So I can't see his eyes. First mistake. You always need to see the client's eyes. But anyway, he went talking. So I'm typing away. And then after a few minutes in my peripheral vision, I see on his arm go up. So I just kind of instinctively grabbed his wrist and, set it into his lap. Keep in mind, he's about a little over an arm length away from me. So I go back to typing. Not even a couple minutes pass. He does it again. The arm goes up. So now I'm like, okay, this obviously is not going to work today. Let me get the teacher and just kind of let him know what's going on. So I get up, push the chair under the desk, and no sooner than I had walked maybe like 3 steps. This I should have provided this information. So this child was, I think he was 12, but I'm kind of small. So he's got like height and maybe a little bit of weight on me. But anyway, so I turn my back to him. Another mistake. Never turn your back to a client. I turn my back to him and I'll go to walk towards the door, and he literally jumps on my back, and it feels like he's trying to pull me down to the ground. So of course, immediately I start screaming like, "Oh my God, help, Christopher Robin, stop. Oh my goodness, what's going on?" I'm like screaming. And they say my voice transcends space and time. So I'm pretty sure it was very loud. But as I'm doing all of this, he even covers my mouth. So I'm like, oh my God. Luckily, my voice was transcending that day, and the teacher obviously heard because he comes running in. No sooner had the teacher hit the threshold of the door that the child falls off and starts crying. So my immediate thought is going to be like, oh my gosh, the teacher's going to feel like I attacked this child. Oh my God, I would never do anything like that. So instead of like him being suspicious of what's going on, he immediately asked me, "Oh my gosh, Miss Green, are you okay? Do you want to press charges?" And I'm thinking, press charges? What? Like, I was just really confused and in a state of shock at that point because, again, I've been knowing this client since October 2019. We got along fairly well. I felt like we had a pretty good rapport. So that's October all the way to February. This is early February at the time. And I'm just flabbergasted. So I'm like, no, and I explained to him what happened. And I was like, well, I'm not going to press charges or anything. I'm just going to go contact my supervisor. And because I know at this point I have to do a critical incident report. So I get in the car. And I call my supervisor, tell her what's going on. She sends me the paperwork. And then something was like, just call Christopher Robin's auntie because he and his siblings are in the custody of their aunt. We'll call her Janae. So I call Janae and I tell her what happened, tell her everything from start to finish. And she's like, quiet on the other end of the line. And so after I finished telling the story, she just lets out this like this exasperated, like I don't know what kind of sound. It was like like a audible exhale, we'll say that. And she's like, Miss Green, I hate to say it, but that's typical Christopher Robin behavior. He has a deep disdain for women, and he's been known to attack us. He even attacked me before. And so I'm like, okay, so keep in mind, I've been seeing this client from October 2019 to February 2020. I've been to this client's home many times to meet with him and his other siblings and Auntie Janae. I have talked to Auntie Janae about their progress. She's even gotten so comfortable with me that Auntie Janae will just randomly call me and tell me what's going on with the kids. So at no point did you think it was pertinent information to let me know that this kid just will haul off and attack women? I didn't say it out loud. That's just what I was thinking. So I said, well, okay. Um, some time goes by, and obviously, this client was assigned to someone else, but I still had to see him when I would see his other four siblings when I would go visit them at home. So this child was in, I'm not gonna say where or what city, but this child was in middle school. He had siblings that were in high school, as well as two siblings that were in elementary school. He was the only one that was in middle school. I hope I'm not telling too much. But yeah, so I no longer saw him, but I still saw the other four siblings, and they were like, you know, pretty much, well, I'll say this. Two of the kids were never a problem. They were like really sweet kids. Anyway, some time goes by, COVID starts. I'm no longer able to see the clients in person anyway. I started having to see them virtually. And Auntie's still calling me here and there. And this had to be like maybe towards the end of March. Auntie Janae calls me. She's like, oh my God, Miss Green, the kids got removed from our home. I'm like, what? And so she tells me what happened. I'm not going to say what happened because I don't want to speak the unspeakable things that occurred. But one of the children stayed because he was like an adult. He was like 19. But and all the other children got placed in different like foster homes. Two of them were unable to be placed, and it was a whole situation. So maybe one day I'll tell that story. That was like, oh my God. There's I'm not gonna talk about it right now, but let me give you the cherry on the top of the sundae. So um it's been a while at this point. This is probably like 2021. I had already moved. Um, I had moved and started a new job. Um, and so I get a call from Auntie Janae, and she was like just giving me updates about her, talking about her and her life. I got married, and I've been visiting this place and that place, and I'm just enjoying my life. And so she was like, I really wanted to call you and tell you about Christopher Robin, what happened. So I'm like, what happened? So apparently, this child was placed in a home with a family that had a small dog. I don't know what type of dog it was. But Auntie Janae told me that Christopher Robin, don't know if I could say this on here. He like he basically killed the dog with his bare hands, put his hands around the dog's neck and squeezed. And I was just like, oh my God, this, I'm about to say any diagnoses, but it tracked. If you know, you know. When you are diagnosed with this as a child, I'm not going to say it because, again, I'm not trying to violate HIPAA. I'm trying to be very careful, but you know, if you're a therapist, usually if a child is diagnosed with a certain disorder and it's not, these symptoms and things are not mitigated before a certain time, it can often turn into this. So we got one of those running amok, another one running amok in Georgia somewhere. I pray that he, I don't know. It just was an awful experience. And let me tell you something else. Just how I guess in shock I was. Keep in mind that happened around, I'm gonna say around noonish. I I continued to work that day. I went and saw the rest of my clients, and then went home like it was nothing. And so that's strange to me. Now that I think back on that experience, I also had other very we'll say anxiety provoking encounters with clients in the past, and maybe I'll tell about those. But I mean, yeah. So hopefully that wasn't too traumatic. Hopefully it was more entertaining than anything. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions like about mental health or anything like that. Um, but thank you for listening to our story time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.